Right, this question is a comparison question. Let's get started. We'll do this usual test taker methodology first, and then we'll have Swetha come in and give us some additional information that we need to know, because this is a beautiful question to get a good handle on comparison questions. When do we use unlike? When do we use while? This entire concept download is what Swetha will be doing when she's discussing it, and watch that piece without fail, right? That's going to help you understand and crack any question. Anytime you see an unlike, anytime you see a while, we should be able to crack such questions with the basis that she is going to give us. But before we do that, let's look at how to get to this answer in the quickest possible time. I'm going to step into the test taker mode. I'm going to quickly do a vertical scan of the answer choices. Two of these answer choices start with an unlike, right? A and E start with unlike. Two of them start with while. So that gives us the indication that we are talking about comparison at some level. We'll look at when we'll use unlike, when we'll use while in just a short while. Choice B alone does not seem to have this word that basically says that there is a comparison. So I'm going to step into B, check out whether that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then let's look at the other ones. I'm going to read B, this part, the underlined part. Ancient Greek art saw the veneration of animal form and the development of equivalent skills to show musculature, poise, beauty, and anatomically correct proportions. Good. So ancient Greek art did all of this. Comma. Ancient Roman art depicted gods as idealized humans shown with characteristic distinguishing features. So ancient Roman art did few things. It depicted gods as idealized humans shown with characteristic distinguishing features. That's a complete sentence in itself. The part in B, that is a complete sentence in itself once you stop it with this proportions, right? So it looks like we have two complete sentences, and they've been connected with a comma, and there is no word like a while, although, however, unlike, or something to say that there is a connect between these two. You cannot have two independent clauses, two complete sentences connected by a comma. You either have to have a semicolon to separate these two. We should have had a semicolon after the proportions, or we should have had a full stop to do that. So B is therefore incorrect. So let's rule out choice B. Now let's step into whether to use unlike or whether to use while. When do we use unlike? We'll use unlike when we're going to compare parameters which are same. We're going to compare two things on the same parameter. For example, if I'm going to compare how the temperatures or the weather in two cities is, right? Let's say unlike New York, California is warm, right? We're essentially comparing both New York and California on the weather, on the temperature that you'll find in that place. So we're comparing on the same parameter. We'll use unlike, we'll use like. Like John, Ron is also a good student. We are comparing both of them on the same parameter. Like, unlike is used for that. When will we use while? While is used when you're talking about two different things. The parameter is not the same. For instance, I might say that while Tom is a good athlete, Ron is a good mathematics student, right? I'm comparing them, talking about two different aspects of those people. Let's read through this entire sentence, the original sentence, and check out, are we talking about the same parameter or are we talking about different one? So if you're talking about different ones, then we know that we'll have to go with while. If you're using the same parameter, then we know that we're going to be going with unlike. Let's read it. Unlike ancient Greek art form, which saw the veneration of animal form and the development of equivalent skills to show musculature, blah, 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 ancient Roman art depicted gods as idealized humans. So here we are talking about how ancient Greek art saw something, saw what? Veneration of animal. And we are talking about how Roman art depicted gods. So we are talking about two different aspects of it. We are talking about how one art form looked at animals and how another art form depicted gods. So we are not comparing like to like. If we had compared how ancient Greek art saw the veneration of animals and how Roman art form saw the veneration of animals, we would have used unlike. Conversely, if you had talked about how ancient Greek form depicted gods and how ancient Roman art depicted gods, we would have gone with unlike. We're talking about two different aspects. Therefore, unlike cannot be used here. Which all answer options have unlike? A and E have unlike. So we're going to be eliminating both A and E. But before we do that, look at one more thing in A and E, which is quite interesting. Unlike ancient art form, which saw the veneration. So look at E also. We have unlike ancient Greek art, which venerated. In both these cases, we are using this relative pronoun which. Right? We'll use a relative pronoun which to give additional information, and that information is not an important information. So whenever we use relative pronoun which, because information is not important, we will have a comma before it. So either in this case, we have a punctuation error. There is no comma after the art. Or conversely, if the information that is given there is important, then we cannot use which as a relative pronoun. We should have used that as a relative pronoun. So in addition to having unlike as an error, which the relative pronoun used in this case is also being used incorrectly. So therefore, we can eliminate answer options A and E. So that leaves us with C and D. Let's look at whether to go with C or D. While ancient Greek art saw the veneration of the animal form and developed equivalent skills to show musculature, I'll read D. While ancient art venerated the animal form and developed equivalent skills. Ancient art form, Greek art, did two things. It venerated the animal form and developed equivalent skills. Both of these are in parallel. Let's look at C. While the ancient Greek art saw the veneration of the animal form and the development of skills would have been in parallel. C is not constructed in a parallel form. D is. So C can be eliminated. We'll go with D as the answer choice. Let's get Swetha to help us understand the theory download for this. This is very, very important. Pay attention to this.
So as Baskar promised, let me just run you through the differences between the usage of unlike and while. Let's talk about when to use unlike and when to use while. I'm going to quickly give you two sentences. Unlike the information in this book, so the first noun that we're talking about is the information. The facts given in the other book, so here we are talking about the facts, are easily verifiable. So in this sentence, what are we comparing? We are comparing information with the facts. And on what basis are we comparing? On the basis of whether the facts can be verified. So both these nouns are being compared on the same parameter. Whether or not it's easy to verify the information in one book and the information in the other book. But if you look at the second example, while the information in this book is exhaustive, so I'm talking about the information on the basis of what? How exhaustive the information is. The facts given in the other book are easily verifiable. So here I'm talking about the facts and determining whether they are verifiable or not. So here, is the information in the first book verifiable? We do not know. We've not talked about it. Are the facts given in the second book exhaustive? We have not talked about it. We are kind of implying that the first book is more exhaustive than the other and that the second book is more easily verifiable than the first, but we have not explicitly stated it. We are talking about book 1 on the basis of one parameter and we're talking about book 2 on the basis of another parameter. In this kind of a situation, you cannot use an unlike. The right usage would be to use a while. So this is the basic difference between unlike and while. Are we comparing on the basis of the same parameter or are we talking about different parameters? Let's look at one more set of sentences. Unlike the previous government, which was focused on curbing gun violence, now if you look at this sentence, the difference between this set and the previous set, I have given some information about the previous government and I have given that information using a which modifier. So I've enclosed it within 2 commas. So let's bracket that off. So what does your base sentence read? Unlike the previous government, the current one is focusing on controlling the opioid crisis. So did the previous government focus on controlling the crisis? It did not. Only the current government is doing it. Apart from the comparison based on whether they are controlling the opioid crisis or not, we are giving one other additional information. The previous government was focused on curbing gun violence. That has nothing to do with the intent of the sentence. That has nothing to do with the comparison that you're trying to implement in the sentence. It is just an add-on information. You should not treat it as part of the base sentence. So the meaning of this sentence would be that you're comparing 2 governments on the basis of what? On the basis of the efforts that are being taken to control the drug crisis. Look at the second set. While the previous government focused on curbing gun violence, so here if you notice there is no punctuation separating this information. It's part of the base sentence itself. So the previous government, what did they do? They focused on curbing gun violence. That's the main information that we are trying to convey in the sentence. The current one is focusing on controlling the drug crisis is the other main information that we are conveying. So here we've talked about the 2 governments on the basis of 2 different parameters. First one focused on gun violence. Second one focused on the drug crisis. Did the first one focus on controlling drugs? We do not know. Did the second one focus on controlling gun violence? We do not know. So we've talked about them on entirely 2 different bases. It's not a direct comparison at all. It's more of a contrast that you're bringing up between the 2 governments. So one thing you can do when you're comparing using unlike, when you're comparing 2 things, like in this first sentence, you're comparing the previous government and the current one. And you're trying to compare on the basis of only one thing, but you want to give additional information about the previous government, you can enclose it within commas. Give it as an add-on modifier. Now let's use this and look at our sentence. Unlike ancient Greek art, which saw the veneration of the animal form and the development of equal in skills, ancient Roman art is how the sentence continues. We've used an unlike. We have continued to keep the veneration of the animal form as base information. We have not given it within commas and bracketed it off. If we had put brackets, if we had enclosed it within 2 commas, your base sentence would have read, unlike ancient Greek art, ancient Roman art depicted gods as idealized humans, and the sentence would have been perfectly fine, because then it would have sounded as if you're comparing both Greek art and Roman art on the basis of how they are depicting gods. Ancient Greek art did not depict gods as idealized humans, Roman art did. And that the Greek art saw the veneration of the animal form would have become like an afterthought to the sentence. Just a little bit of extra information thrown in. When you don't have that punctuation, when you don't give it as an unimportant information, when you give it as base information, your intent of the sentence is to say that Greek art venerated animals while the Roman art depicted gods. Then the sentence becomes that you're talking about 2 different parameters. And that's why we had to take the decision to go with the while usage and not with the unlike usage. So please understand the differences here. Use unlike when you're making a direct comparison, talking about the absolute same thing on both sides of the comparison. But use while when it's not really a direct comparison, when it's more of a contrast, when it's more of an indirect comparison, because you're kind of talking about 2 different parameters. And whether you determine it might be based on the usage of punctuation, the usage of important and unimportant modifiers in the sentence. So please pay attention to that as well. Don't just look at whether like and unlike are using nouns. Yes, they have to talk about nouns, but that's not our only decision-making factor in determining whether you have to use a like, unlike, or a while. For more of our videos on the theory and on discussion of questions, you can sign up as a trial user on wzko.in/core, and you can also subscribe to the channel. Get your friends to do it as well.